Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Wildy, and I'm the chair of the Prince George's County NAACP Communications Team. We'd like to thank you for being here today to attend Part 5 of our 2022 Economic Empowerment Series entitled Foreclosures and Evictions. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into some of the root causes of our issues here within the county, as well as those throughout the country. Our moderator today is our housing chair, Liz Johnson. Liz and her entire team are passionate about addressing these issues. So with no further delay, I'm going to turn the mic over to Liz. Liz, take it away.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming in. It's so nice of you to give us a part of your day. Really appreciate it. Today, we're going to be talking, as Mark said, about foreclosures and evictions in foreclosures. Now, the first thing I want to say is that what we're giving today is information. It's not legal advice. So if you have any kind of legal issues, you want to take that up with your attorney, but we're going to be giving you information. And hopefully this information is going to be able to help you to paint a mind picture. We want you to paint a picture for you of just what happened in this whole foreclosure saga. It started in 2008. Now, we've heard so many stories, my committee, myself, Beth Jacobson. We are just overwhelmed with the stories that we hear, where people are constantly talking about how people bought more house they could afford. Nobody talks about these predatory loans. Nobody, even the people who were victimized, don't really know what happened. So what this is about is to be able to show you what happened. And then we're going to find out what we can do about it at the very end of this. But we have a series of things we want to show you that hopefully is going to open your mind, because we go rather weary of hearing people bought more house than they could afford. So the first thing we're going to talk about is that what really happened? And Beth Jacobson, who is a member of our housing committee and the NAACP, she's going to tell us and take us to the very start, from the time you see that house all tricked out and it's ooh, I want that house. And you say, oh my God, we can't afford this. Well, the loan officer says, well, come on in, sit down, have a seat. Let us talk to you about this. Beth is going to tell you about that.
This is great.
Who said that? This is great. Oh, yes. So Beth, take it away. Tell us all take us from the very beginning so that we can begin to paint this picture for people.
Certainly. Thank you, Liz. Just as way of background, I spent 9 years working for Wells Fargo in the belly of the beast. And I like to call that my riding the stagecoach to hell, basically. So I started at Wells Fargo 2001, which is about the time that the subprime world was opening up. So when Liz talks about, when you said 2008, that we saw all of this predatory lending, it started leading up to that back in 2000, 2001. So the new thing that happened, just to explain some of the terminology, is the securitization of loans. So back in the day, you would go to your bank and pretty much get a plain vanilla 30-year fixed loan. And the entity, the bank that you walked into, was the one that held your loan, and that's who you talked to. That's where you made your payments. So what changed in the early 2000s is it was actually a mathematician from MIT who got hired by Chase to come up with this way to make even more money off of mortgages. So what they would do is they'd pool a group of mortgages together as mortgage-backed securities, and you've probably heard that term out there, and were sold on the secondary market. That means they were just sold to investors. There was about 4 or 5 steps of hoops they had to jump through, but they sold these. So they sold very well because people were thinking, wow, the money, the income stream is tied to somebody's house. And so that's the most important asset. So if for some reason you couldn't pay your bills, the theory was you're going to pay your mortgage, which most people would do. You know, they're going to cut their cable, they're going to cut other things, going out to the movies, whatever, because they're going to pay their mortgage because that's the roof over their head. But then what happened is the terminology in the industry is the investor appetite for these mortgages grew. They wanted to buy more mortgages. So the lenders, the Wells Fargo, the Bank of America, the Chase, the Citi, all of those decided, how can we get more mortgages to sell? Because they're buying these faster, we can originate. So let's put homeowners that typically have not been able to purchase homes into these types of mortgages. And that's where you end up with your predatory lending. They aggressively went after home buyers that may not have been able to afford that particular house. And getting back to what Liz said, where you look at the razzle dazzle of this nice, I'll call it a McMansion, that a homeowner wants to buy, at a certain point, the loan officer should have said, you really can't afford that house based on the income that you make. Instead of doing that, the loan officer actively said, you know what? I have ways to put you into this house. They didn't even think about whether or not the homeowner could afford the house. And let me just say this, once the subprime industry started and the subprime loans were out there, a loan officer on a typical what I'll call prime A loan, the plain vanilla 30-year fix, would maybe make $500 commission. On a subprime loan, you could make $2,500. We called it a lot of fat on the bone. And that went to the loan officer, to the branch, you know, and spread throughout the company. And so it was in the, the loan officer was incentivized to put people in loans they couldn't afford. And so the question comes out, well, how come people didn't know they couldn't afford that? Well, these were fast talking loan officers that typically said, look, get into the house for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, your rate will adjust. And then we're going to get you into a better loan. But you need to fix your credit, or you need to do this, or maybe you're going to be making more money, or the value of your house is going to go up. You'll be able to refinance and get cash out. All these things were thrown at the homeowner. And a lot of these homeowners thought they were getting 30-year fix until the moment that they went to settlement, sat down at the table at a stack of 3 inches of paperwork, said sign at the bottom, and they just lifted up the corner and people signed, and they didn't realize that their income had been overinflated, sometimes double, triple what they actually made, and that they were put into an adjustable rate arm and not a fixed rate. So homeowners didn't know going into this. When I worked at Wells Fargo, there was a program where loan officers were trained to reverse engineer a stated income loan in order that a homeowner could qualify. And I won't go into all of that. I know the time is limited, but let me just say this. Wells Fargo settled with the Department of Justice about 2 years ago for over $2 billion, with a B, $1 billion, for predatory loans that it originated because the investors got burned. Basically, it was forget about the homeowners. But these particular programs had a 50% default rate. So if you think about it, I don't care whatever industry you're in, if you're making brakes, if you're making cookies, whatever you're making, if you had a 50% rate of default or a 50% rate that something is wrong with that product would be immediately taken off the market. That didn't happen. Wells Fargo made tens of billions of dollars. And I'm specifically citing Wells Fargo because I worked there and the settlement was against Wells Fargo, but all of the lenders were doing this. So they knew there was a 50% rate back in 2005, a 50% rate of failure of default for these homeowners. They kept originating those loans after the fact. So Wells Fargo and the other companies had business decisions that these subprime loans were going to pay for the fixed loss of the companies, the fixed cost. And so there was pressure on the loan officers. And if you were a loan officer and you didn't close 3 subprime loans per month in a quarter, you were fired. So if somebody walked in the door, qualified for a prime loan, they were put into a subprime loan. I'm going to stop there because I literally could take 2 hours up on how predatory the lending institutions were. But just to give you an idea, and I want to stress, the loan officers in most cases manipulated the borrower to get into homes that they couldn't afford. It was not the other way around. Thank you, Liz.
Well, you are so welcome. And bear in mind, as we move along here, we're painting this picture for you because you will see how you will play a part in this later on. But this is to begin to open your mind as to just what happened and how communities of color were taken advantage of. You know, insult to misery, it's about to happen again, folks. It's about to happen again because I don't know if you read the article in the Washington Post recently where they talked about the corporations buying up all these houses. As a matter of fact, I was talking with a friend of mine who is in what I call the little backside of the mortgage industry. And I told him I was interested in buying a house. I gave him the zip code. He sent me a list. And in one zip code, friends, one zip code here in Prince George's County, there are 896 people who are in pre-foreclosure. Now, That means that once you get into the grip of these lenders, there's going to be hell to tell the captain. And so then also, what we're going to be showing you as we go along, how people, and you'll see Beth again, what we can try to do about that. But a lot of this has to do with the participation of the community. I just want you to take a look at this chart. Mark, can you put that chart up? I want to show you what happened at when in 2009, when this all started. I want you to see the number of foreclosures that were applied for here in this county alone. Mark, would you put that chart up, please? So that when you think about these loans and how they came at Prince George's, you need to remember we are the marketed as the most affluent Black county in the United States. So these investors are looking and thinking, oh my God, look at here, let's go get them. So enter these adjustable rate mortgages, the ninja loans, stated income, pick a payment, interest only. And they will say to you, well, we did that because we wanted Black people to be able to get homes. So we came up with these products. But just as Beth said, these products were predatory. They were predatory in nature. So then
I just wanted to, in the mortgage industry, they referred to Prince George's County as the subprime capital of the United States, industry-wide. That's how Prince George's County was referred to.
And you can believe right now, we are in the bullseye. We are in the epicenter for these upcoming loans after the mediation was lifted, the moratorium was lifted. Like I said, 869 homes in one zip code. So then when you really think about it, you think about what does this mean for the tax base? Here in Prince George's County, a lot of our tax money comes from homeowners. So then what these lenders will have done in the past, even once they bought these houses, they would not go and register their ownership in the courthouse. So when they got ready to send out for tax money, well, guess what? There you go. Thank you so much. So then when they got ready to send out for taxes, they don't know who to tax. They don't know who to send it to. I want you to look really at 2009. Oh, it's gone again. There you go. Now this is from 2007 up until 2019. That's when the COVID-19 came in. We couldn't get very many figures from the court, but these came from the county court. Check out fiscal year 2009, 10,155 foreclosure cases were filed. In 2010, 12,789. This means that over 75,000 homes, they were foreclosure cases filed in this county, over 75,000. So then, now that you've seen that chart, I'm hoping, as I said before, to be able to paint this picture. So now we want to hear from Mr. Wesley Queen. We invited Mr. Queen and we asked him to talk first because I want you to begin to understand how important it is for us to fight for laws that will make a difference, to have these laws amended. That's where the rubber hits the road, folks. The rubber hits the road in the legislature, because we have even visited with the courts. We have talked to the judges, and they say, well, we can't do anything until the legislature tells us to. Well, guess who the legislative people listen to? They listen to you. So if we don't, we're going to be having a system so that we can really push our legislators to do what we need to have done. And I'm going to be introducing you now to Mr. Queen, Mr. Wesley Queen, and I want to read his credentials because it's so lengthy. Mr. Queen is the director of the Legacy Leadership Institute on Public Policy Programs at the University of Maryland School of Public Health in College Park. Now, he's graciously answered our plea to come and share with us how a bill becomes a law in Maryland. Now, maybe many of you have probably seen Fragile Rock and you think, oh, well, I know how a bill becomes a law, but that's at the federal level. Mr. Queen, can you please come in and tell us what happens behind the scenes and what happens in order for a bill to become a law? You're on, you have the microphone.
Good morning, all. Morning.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to thank the NAACP for inviting me to participate in this seminar. And I'll start out a little bit by talking a little bit about what I just heard about the foreclosures. And this is, y'all can discuss this later, and Beth is probably the person that can best talk about this. But I think there was a consent decree, Beth, and you can correct me. And Maryland was one of the states that participated in the consent decree that Wells Fargo and the others participated in as a result of the foreclosures. So as you probably know, we have an election coming up for Attorney General, State Attorney General. One of the things you may want to consider is contacting the candidates and have them discuss what Maryland is doing in terms of that consent decree, because some of these individuals might be able to benefit. So I'll stop right there, but that's a little bit out of my lane, but in any case.
Well, so that we don't forget, Dr. Queen, Mr. Queen, can you just say something about that? Because we know about that consent decree and what happened.
Well,
So
sure,
quick.
the consent decree, which I think you're referring to, is a national mortgage
Yes.
settlement.
Yes.
And that's pretty much expired. And the problem with the national mortgage settlement is nobody's feet were held to the fire. They put all of this out there, then nothing happened. But to what you're saying and about the Attorney General, one thing I will throw out, that settlement I talked about, the $2 billion that DOJ settled with Wells Fargo, that went to pay investors. So my question to any potential state attorney would be or Attorney General would be, why aren't we doing any of these settlements with these major banks to benefit the homeowner? The homeowner lost their homes with all of this. Yes, the investors lost some money, but why aren't we helping the homeowners? So that would be my question to any potential Attorney General.
So you have the microphone back, Mr. Queen.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, I'm going to give you some information this morning, and primarily in slides, which in my view helps to prepare you for public testimony. Now, I'll start out by saying normally you are invited to testify either by the legislator, and you're normally testifying either for or against. I want you to keep that in mind, that when you are testifying for the most part and for legislation, you're normally testifying either for or against, and that you can make changes to it. But I want to point that out first. All right, then. So we're starting out, and remember where we're starting from is this is information that I think will help you to prepare when you are invited to testify on legislation in the state of Maryland. And we'll start by talking about the structure of the Maryland General Assembly. And of course, Maryland has two houses. We have a House of Delegates and we have a Senate. And you all later on this year, of course, will be voting. Remember, this year, we had a census early in the year. And then, of course, determine how many individuals live in a particular area. And then, of course, they draw a map so with this map to represent individuals and legislators use. So you'll be voting for the members of the General Assembly for the upcoming future year. So keep that in mind, and you'll have a primary. You may note the primary in Maryland has changed a couple of times. You'll have a primary, and then you'll have the general election. So that's where we are with that. In the state of Maryland, what we do is we divide the state of Maryland into districts. Individuals who represent you in Annapolis represent a particular district. There are 47 districts in Maryland, and we have 47 senators who technically represent the whole district. And then we have delegates who have 141 delegates, and the delegate represents part of the district. So again, that's first of all, bear in mind that individuals represent a district, an area of where you live. Also, we have, and I mentioned briefly, and you hear all the time, we have a federal government and a state government. In Maryland, of course, in the federal government, you have the House of Representatives and the state. You have about 7 individuals in your house, the House of Delegates who represent you. And then, of course, you have your 2 U.S. senators. In our state government, of course, we have the governor. And again, we're going to be having a new governor next year, because, of course, the governor's term is 8 years. So the governor's term will be ending. We'll have a new governor, and of course, you'll be voting for a governor pretty soon. And that's, we refer to that as executive branch. And then the legislative branch, we talked about it. You have two houses.
All right, let me have 2 sausage biscuits, please.
All right, fine.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Mute your phone, please. Mute your phone.
I got,
Whoever ordered the sausage biscuits needs to mute your phone.
she has.
Okay, great.
Or share with everyone.
That wasn't a bad idea, though. But in
I liked it.
all right, we have the legislative branch. We talked about, we call it the General Assembly. Again, then you have your state Senate and you have the House. We have a judiciary as well. We have a Court of Appeal. We do not have a Supreme Court in Maryland. Our court is, the Court of Appeals is our top court. We have a Court of Special Appeal, circuit courts and district courts, and some of those, of course, in your county.
What side?
Next slide.
Okay.
All right, and now we're going to come to the local government. So some say, of course, the government that governs best are the ones that governs least, the ones who are closest to the people. In Maryland, of course, we have 23 counties and Baltimore City. And bear in mind that Baltimore City geographically is not in a county. That's why it says 23 counties in Baltimore City. Of course, you represent one of the counties, Prince George's County, one of our larger counties. And then we have 3 forms of government in the counties. Of course, we have the county commissioners, which is back, and we have home rule, and then we have a charter. You have a charter form of government in Prince George's County. And of course, we have what we call towns and cities. You have places like La Plata and et cetera. So the number of towns and cities, and that is the structure of the government that's in the state of Maryland. Again, we have the state government, and then you have the local government. Next slide, please.
Okay.
This is just simply a map. If you want to see a map as to where the various counties are in the state. And of course, you can see where Prince George's, where you sort of borders Anne Arundel and Montgomery and et cetera. Next slide. And now we're going to get to the legislative part. In other words, I wanted you to have an introduction, some idea as to what happens in Annapolis before you are asked to testify. So this is a legislator, and you have to be a legislator to introduce a bill in Annapolis. That information, that suggestion comes from you, the citizen, can come from anyone. But in order to introduce the bill to the General Assembly, you have to be an elected official, either a senator, a state senator, or a delegate. So it says sponsored by one of those individuals. And then the bill is drafted, as we say, and then of course, it is given to a presiding officer. Now we have 2 presiding officers in the government in Annapolis. One is the president of the Senate, and the other one is the Speaker of the House. For those of you who, we also comment that for the first time for the last 2 years, Maryland's Speaker of the House has been an African-American and has been a female. Next slide. Here's where you probably would have your first interaction after you were asked to testify. The legislation goes to a committee. We need to divide up the responsibilities by committees, as they do in Congress as well. They primarily handle subject matter. So you can see there the committees that we have, both in the House and in the Senate. And depending upon where you are asked to testify, you will be testifying before a committee in the House or a committee in the Senate. That's why we're in the House, we have the appropriations, economic matters, environment, health and government operations, judiciary, and ways and means. And in the Senate, we have the budget and tax, education, health, environmental affairs, finance, and judicial proceedings. And that's where the work gets done. Those are the individuals who have received the testimony, review the legislation, and then vote initially on the legislation before it goes to the full body. So if you are asked to testify before a committee, That committee then will vote on that particular piece of legislation. If that legislation does not pass from that committee, that's the end of it right there. Next slide. This is a sort of a summary. In other words, we have what we call the chamber of origin and then the opposite chamber, because in Maryland, the bill must be passed by both houses, by both chambers. You don't have to necessarily introduce the bill in each of the chambers, but in any case, both chambers must vote, and it must be an identical bill. If, for example, the bill passes out of the chamber of origin, let's say it's the first chamber, and it goes to this opposite chamber, if the opposite chamber changes a comma or anything else, that bill then has to go back to the chamber of origin, and that chamber of origin just must approve that comma change. And what we have, what we call the first reading of the bill or the introduction of the bill, that's when it's given to the full body. Then I said referred to a committee. And here's probably where you would have the most impact, is when the bill then goes for second reading. It then goes to the full body. And that's where any recommendations, any changes, that's where they occur. So that if you had a recommendation, even that you would give that to your delegate or senator, they then would introduce that, we refer to as an amendment, on the second reading, and then the full body would vote on that. And then we go to third reading, where we do the final vote, but there's no changes. You cannot change or amend, as we say, the bill on third reading. And the same steps are repeated in the opposite chamber. I'll pause here a second. All right, next slide.
There are a few questions in the chat.
Oh, all right, we can do that right now. Mark is looking in the chat.
One of the questions is, will you explain crossover?
Yes. Okay. Yes. And we had a good point to explain crossover. By the way, we now in Annapolis, we're on crossover. And here's what crossover means. Remember, I just mentioned that the bill has to pass in both chambers. What we mean by crossover is, let's look at the chamber of origin on the left. When that bill is voted on and is approved on the chamber of origin, it must cross over to that opposite chamber. So when we talk about crossover, and there are dates, what we're talking about is, if you have a bill that you've testified on, and that bill was in the chamber of origin, but it was not completed in time to cross over to the opposite chamber, for the most part, that bill will not pass for that session. So crossover is when the bill that has been completed in one chamber crosses over from one chamber to the other to be considered. That's what crossover is.
We have another question from the chat. How do you get a sponsor for your proposed legislation?
Yes, your original sponsor would be your delegate or your senator. That's who your sponsor would be. You as a constituent of either a delegate or a senator, depending upon where you live, you would ask that senator or that delegate to sponsor that legislation on your behalf. They would introduce that legislation on your behalf. That's how you get a sponsor.
The last question on your segment so far is, what is the new primary date?
You're mute, Mr. Queen.
Thank you, Mark. The July 11th is our new primary date.
There are no more questions in the chat so far.
All right, we will now go to the next slide. This is simply explains the same thing that we've been talking about with respect to the process. It's just a graph to show you it goes one house and then it must go over to the other house. What's been added to this one, which we haven't commented on, of course, that once it's approved by both houses, it then goes to the governor for the governor's signature. The governor does not have to sign every bill in order for it to become law. However, a governor can what we call veto a bill if he does not want it to become law. But for the most part, bills will go over to the governor and the governor will sign, but a bill will become law with or without the governor's signature. It will not, of course, become a law if he vetoes it. Next slide. This I think is probably the most important piece of information for you if you were trying to decide whether you were going to introduce legislation or support legislation. This actually is a document, you'll see one later, which is part of the bill, which actually, I say, explains a history of the legislation generally and its financial impact on the state of Maryland. Every bill that's passed must be reviewed in the light of how expensive, what will it cost the citizen of Maryland if we are to implement this particular piece of legislation. But that's what this primarily does. Now, let me comment that if you are going to ask to testify on a particular piece of legislation, you may or may not have access to this document, but from the webpage, but we'll cover that a little later. Next slide. We were talking earlier about the bill hearing. Now, this is where you would get involved. You would be asked to testify on a particular piece of legislation. You would prepare some testimony. That testimony would be emailed to the office of your sponsor, whoever asked you to sponsor the legislation. They then would review that, and they would then send it to the committee, which we talked about, the committee of jurisdiction, or the committee who then would have bill hearings and would discuss and decide to vote on this legislation. And at the bill hearing is where you would appear. Now, let me mention to you that two things with respect, they'll tell you as well. When you attend the bill hearing, when you are testifying, you cannot read your full testimony because you will already send it there in writing. And in today's environment, you'll probably have 2 minutes to present your views on this particular piece of legislation. Even though your written testimony may be a lot longer, you'll have 2 minutes. So you simply need to summarize your views on this particular piece of legislation. Next slide. We've talked about the committee structure. I'll just mention that it says here, each member of the General Assembly is assigned to one of those committees, and you can see the numbers there. In the Senate, somewhere between 11 and 14 members are on the committee. The House is much larger, of course, so there'll be between 21 and 25 members on the committee. So depending upon whether you're testifying in the House or the Senate, the number of individuals that are involved. Also, you will have no communication with members of the committee. You will be simply making a broad statement, and the presiding officer, or the committee chair usually, is the one who would ask a question, may ask a question of you, or would call on a particular member to ask you a question. So you simply would be there to answer any question that they might have. Next slide. We'll mention to you, and you hear the word amendments, if the bill is going to be changed in any way after the committee has rendered its decision, it has to be done by an amendment. And those amendments normally are voted on we talked about earlier about second reading, but and the change in the bill has to be done by an amendment. And that's a formal document that is prepared, and all of the members of the body vote on that amendment, not just the committee members. Next slide, please. We mentioned earlier that, of course, after the bill's passed, it goes over to the governor for his signature or not. And then we have the last night of the session, which I'm not sure the date this year, it's April 11th. This year, it's on April 11th. you may have seen on television, usually if you're watching the news late, that you'll see the confetti coming down from the balcony, which signifies the end of the session, or sine die, as we say. That normally happens at 12 p.m. on the last night of the session. So 12 a.m. And on that day, of course, they're there from 9 o'clock in the morning until 12 a.m. the next day. And a lot of bills are passed or failed on that last day. Next slide. Again, we talked about that. And that shows the governor and the president and senate at that time signing the bill. I'll see if there are any questions right now before we move to the.
There is one question in the chat from Kathy Bartolomeo. How to follow with subcommittees? If Ms. Bartolomeo is still on there, maybe she can tell us what she means by that specifically, because she says she had to leave a little early. Are you there, Ms. Bartolomeo?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
I'm following some legislation, but I have to rely on another group to tell me when it's getting out of a subcommittee or going to another location. I can't figure out. I have my own account for my legislation, my General Assembly set up, but I don't understand how to follow the subcommittees.
All right, the subcommittee is an internal structure of the committee. You normally, as a citizen, do not have access to that subcommittee. But here's what I would suggest to you. Someone asked you, so your delegate or your senator asked you to provide testimony on this particular piece of legislation. Am I right on that? Okay, now, so if that is the case, you can contact the senator or delegate who asked you to testify, ask to speak to their chief of staff, and ask their chief of staff to contact the chief of staff of that subcommittee or of that committee. Which committee is it?
Sorry.
I think she's muted. Kathy, are you muted?
Sorry.
Which committee is it?
I did testimony on the environmental human rights. So I don't know.
It should have been education and economic.
Okay. All right.
That's the committee it should have been.
Okay.
Yes, it was EHE.
Yes, that should have been. Yeah, so first you would contact your delegate, or I guess it was your delegate who asked you to sign, since it's a house. Contact your delegate's chief of staff and ask the chief of staff to contact the chief of staff of that subcommittee, of that main committee, education, economic, and ask them to get you the information. But generally that information is not available to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
But there's a way to get it. Okay. All right, we can go to the next slide. Which one we do? Okay, this is the main website for the Maryland General Assembly. And this is the link that you would use to get to that website. Next slide, please. Now, this is another website that's available to you. It's in Maryland Manual Online. It also has a feature on how a bill becomes a law, and that is the web address down at the bottom, where you could read those steps that essentially we've been talking about. So this is just another source of information available to you.
There's also a couple of questions that people sent to me.
Oh, go
So I
ahead. It's a good time to ask those.
Someone asked me, what can we do to push a bill? And we only have 3 months to do it.
All right. First of all, of course, you need to start early. I mean, because you only have the 3 months. And to push a bill now, is this a bill that has been, and I'm just asking you in general, are we talking about a bill that has already been introduced? I guess that's what they mean.
I think that what they're talking about is how to even get a bill introduced. I
All
know
right.
that we talked about going to your representative.
Yes,
But doesn't the representative have to send it to the people who write the bill out and type it
Yes.
up?
yes. Your representative has to do that. Yes.
And then it has, I think it has to go to the bill writers.
Well, that's a little bit in the weeds, but you don't need to worry about that. Yes, the bill is drafted, as we say, but you don't need to worry about that. If you're going to push a bill, you just simply need to be sure that your representative introduced the bill and that the bill covers your concern. You just need to stay in touch with your representative before the bill is prepared or drafted and then sent to the respective committee. That's your responsibility, would be to constantly stay in touch with your representative before the bill gets into the system.
And here's another question. What inspires a legislator to introduce a bill?
Oh, yes, that's a very good question. First of all, the legislator is there to represent you, So what would inspire that person is that's their responsibility. When they signed on and they were out knocking on your door and asking for money, they said, I want to get elected to represent you. So what would inspire them would be that that's what they committed to do, number one. And if they want to get reelected, those are the two inspirations. That's what they said they wanted to do when they filed to run, that we want to represent the people of District 5 or whatever it is. So that's what would inspire them, because that's what they said they wanted to do. Well, I think you have another question, then we'll get to this. Did you have another question, I think, Liz?
No, they just said, how do we get all this done in just 3 months? What's the next question?
Oh,
That's part of
okay.
it.
No, you cannot get it all done in 3 months. That's why you need to start. You almost need to start in June. You need to start in June, in my view, or at 4th of July to give you you need to start at 4th of July if you want to get it done, because in many cases, and bear this in mind, that the legislation also has to be approved by your local delegation, your county councilman. Sometimes before then it goes to Annapolis, and I'll give you an example then in a moment. So therefore, that's why you need to start at 4th of July. All right. Now, what we have there, we talked about the policy note earlier. Here's a piece of legislation, a current piece of legislation that I found that I thought would be interesting to the members. You can see there, you see the Department of Legislative Services. That's the organization that prepares the bill, drafts the bills, we say. All bills have a number. HB means House Bill. SB is Senate bill. So when you're talking to your representative, you normally have to refer to the bill as HB 1057. And you note there that in this case, it says Prince George's County delegation. Now, we've been talking about your state delegation, but you have a local delegation that represents Prince George's various districts in Prince George's County. And all of those individuals represent the Prince George's County delegation. As you know, they meet in Upper Marlboro. So in this particular piece of legislation, here's a piece of legislation that your local council individuals, the Prince George's County Council, drafted and voted on. And then they sent this bill, as they do, for instance, to Annapolis, and was given to the Environment and Transportation Committee. That's the committee on the left where the bill was assigned, for that committee to vote on this particular piece of legislation. Now, again, this is in the current session. This is going on now. And I think there's been one hearing on that bill, but I wanted to give you an example of that. And this bill primarily, and you'll see, deals with the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning and the need for recreation programs primarily for youth in Prince George's County. So what they want to do is take the responsibility for youth programs from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning and create a new authority to have that responsibility. That's what this, scroll. That's That's what this bill does. But let's go to the second page of that bill. Second, I want to do. Can you still scroll? Keep going.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I selected this now, this is something that you could keep an eye on, but remember, we're halfway through. So this bill may not pass this year, but I'm saying, but the other thing I want to mention here is note that, let's look at the third line. It's going to actually establish a work group. Sometimes when there's legislation that does not pass initially, they establish a work group or study group to look at the issue, make some recommendations, and come back to the General Assembly at the next session. One of the things where the NAACP could be asked, maybe a little late now, but next year maybe, to become a member of this work group. If you scroll, can you scroll down for me, please? I think I'll show you that it mentions the organizations in this bill that keep scrolling. I'll tell you when we get that. Right there. So here's what we talk about. The work group consists of one member of the Prince George's County House, one member of the Prince George's County Senate, one member appointed by the county executive, one member appointed by the county council, one representative of the Prince George's County Board and Girls Club. The NAACP, in my mind, could also have been added to this if someone had. So one of the ways to begin to get your input in legislation, when they have a work group, you could ask to become a member of that work group, because they're the ones that are going to make the recommendations that in the future will become part of legislation. So that's why I particularly selected this particular piece of legislation. All right.
Okay.
Now, normally this is what you would have when your representative asks you to testify on behalf of a particular piece of legislation. This is what would be sent to you, which is probably the introductory part of the bill. Again, it just tells you who it's by, tells you the date it was introduced, and it tells you the committee it was assigned to. And then again, that's the committee you would be asked to make your presentation to. But yes, but that's what you would normally, the policy notes, you would not normally see that, but this is what your representative would send to you and ask you to testify either for or against. And then you would have to stay in touch with that particular legislator to find out when the bill is going to be heard.
You want me? Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions that, I don't know where we're on time, but.
Now, you're so important what you have to say. So if you have anything more to say, then we certainly would love to hear it. I don't know if there are any more questions in the chat.
Let's start there first.
Okay.
Let's see if there are any more questions.
Do you have any, Operator Stacy, are there any more questions in the chat?
There are no additional questions in the chat, but I would like for everyone to turn their attention where there are many hyperlinks that are placed there that will take you to the Maryland Manual online, to the webpage for the General Assembly, and a few other hyperlinks that are there that you might find helpful.
And I just want to say, Mr. Queen, I'd like for you to sum up and just help everyone to understand, because this is what this seminar is all about, how important it is for us to make our demands of our legislators, and to have our legislators to understand that this is government for the people and by the people, and not the corporations, which is turning out what's happening to our homes. And so I don't know whether or not you need to say more on that subject, or if you have more to say on that subject. Well,
especially in an election, you may mention that let me mention also, let's at the end of each session, each member of the General Assembly not only prepares a report, we refer to it as the end of session report. Each member of the General Assembly prepares a report on what they were able to get accomplished during that session. So one of the things you can begin to ask for, again, this will happen after April 11th, but your representative to email you a copy of their end of session report, which explains what they did, the bills that they were able to get passed, bills are introduced that they were not able to get passed, etc., and maybe what they plan to do in the future. So each of you can request an end of session report, sort of a report card, if you will, in terms of what they were able to do this session. But in terms of wrapping up, I want you to keep in mind July 4th. If you want to do anything regarding legislation for the upcoming session, you need to start, in my mind, on July 4th. Get in contact with your legislator and then begin to have discussions about your issue and what you want legislation to address. So that's, and then you should stay in touch with them around Labor Day, just to give you some holidays to work with, and Labor Day and Thanksgiving. To me, those are key dates, because again, the session is going to start in January of the following year. And most of the time, if that legislation is not at least researched by Thanksgiving, it's going to be difficult to get it prepared and introduced in time for the session. So I think I want you to keep those dates in mind if you're interested in having legislation introduced next year. One of the other things I'll mention, which is related to legislation, there are going to be a number of issues on your ballot this year, which will require you to vote on. There probably will be one on marijuana as number one. There'll probably be one on voting, on online voting, gambling, etc. But one other key part of the legislative process is your voting in the upcoming election, both in the primary but in general election in November. But there'll be issues on the ballot, statewide issues. Let's take gambling as that will require your yay or nay vote. And that will probably be in your ballot when you get that. When you get your ballot, you'll see it there. But these are things that you have to vote on. Also, in some cases, there are bond issues, local bond issues, to do things in your county that will require your vote on your ballot. So you need to, of course, begin to take a good hard look at your ballot when you receive it to see what issues are there, as well as what individuals are there that you're going to be voting for.
I guess one of the concerns of a lot of advocates is how there's apathy. And so one of the things that we're hoping to share here is that how important it is that people need to get behind their legislators and support the ones that support us, and to be able to get rid of the ones that don't support us, and how much their voice and how important their voice is in that process.
The only other comment I'm going to make with respect to that legislation that we're talking about, the authority for the sports authority, all of you all that have property in Prince George's County, you pay part of your property tax is used to help to fund Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning, and of course the activities for youth and others, so that you have an indirect interest in that particular piece of legislation, other legislation, because that commission authority is funded partially by your taxes.
Well, if that is the end of your presentation.
We have one question. We have a person with their hand up, Ava Richardson.
That's
Hi,
okay.
good morning. I was thinking too that for next year, we could get together as a group and lobby. You know, I know with my school at PGCC, that's exactly what we did. We would have like meetings where, I guess pretty much like this one, where our the chair of that meeting, she was, you know, coaching us, you know, on how to lobby and, you know, what to say. And then we had actually dates where all the students were to meet together and, you know, go down to the Capitol, and we were, you know, going to give our testimony. Yeah, just a suggestion that, you know, for when we do lobby together next year, we can do it as a group and, you know, travel together to that meeting to, place our concerns.
Thanks so much, Ava. Really appreciate that. Ava is one of, has been working with the NAACP for some time now and does good work. And so once again, Stacey, if we don't have any more questions, we're gonna let Mr. Queen.
I think
You're
you're
on
muted.
mute.
Liz, you went on
I
mute.
think you're unmuted.
Gee, that was so profound what I said too. Let me see if I can.
With the hands and all, I was like,
Oh yeah, I'm gonna see if I
yeah.
can get the groove back again. And I just wanted to thank Ava very much for that question. She's a very helping person with the NAACP board. And I'm just saying that if we don't have any more questions and I don't see the board lit up, Mr. Queen.
Let me make a comment on what Ava said. However, it's possible for you to have what's referred to, you could have it NAACP Lobbying Day, where you would have to speak with your representative. Of course, you would schedule a day in Annapolis, and you could then all of you would then contact your respective delegate or senator, and you would travel to Annapolis on that day. It has to be, of course, well organized. And then you would have 10 or 15 minutes to meet with your representative in Annapolis. Now, we haven't been able to do that because of COVID in the last 2 years, but in the past, organizations like yours have had a day in Annapolis. Actually, you're gonna have about maybe 2 hours at the most. But in any case, you could all travel to Annapolis, and then you would schedule a brief meeting with your individual representative in Annapolis. A Monday evening is one of the times that this is most often done, is a Monday evening in Annapolis, if you want to look at your calendar. And the reason for that is because on Monday, generally, the General Assembly does not go into session until 8 p.m. Doesn't mean any work isn't done during the day, but I would suggest you give thought to your calendars after the session has started. Take a look at a Monday evening, usually somewhere between, I'd say 5 and 7, where you would go to Annapolis, schedule meetings with each of them, then you would be able to go and meet with your individual representatives as a group.
Well, we just had some notes from Roseanne Boat, who said you can also do this on Zoom, and she's got a template. So we'll be getting in touch with you, Ms. Boat, so that we can get that template from you.
Yes, good.
Okay.
I'd like to see it too.
Ms. Morning has her hand up.
Yes, good morning to everyone. I just would like to know how we can get in touch with Mr. Queen.
We'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, you can put my email in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
I welcome that. I'll try to respond.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, I've been trying to get rid of you, Mr. Queen, for about the last 5 minutes.
All right. Goodbye.
I've been trying to let you off the hook.
That's all right. No problem.
Okay, so once again.
Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your session.
Okay, last call. You're out.
I'm out.
Now I had Mr. Queen to come in because, as I said before, I want you to bear in mind as we go through this process, how we have been really taken advantage of by the community and how we have really been on the short end of the stick. And I want to show you this next short and this next trailer. It's a video that shows what happened to these loans on Wall Street when they signed these predatory loans. Who got what? Why did people do it? And we found this very, very interesting trailer from a movie called The Big Short. It was an award-winning movie. Maybe some of you saw it. And it told a movie, it was all about how these Wall Street bigwigs made millions of dollars off of these loans that were pushed by these loan officers, etc. Do you have that short, do you have that, what do you call it? That
Video?
Yeah, video. Yes, do you have it?
Yes, I do.
Big words like video kind of get me.
All right.
Okay, yes, the show, it's from The Big Short. Okay. So yeah, it took a while. It took a while for them to do it. but people made billions of dollars off of these loans. And what happened in Prince George's County, people were put out on the street. I mean, I had visited people who were sleeping in their cars with their babies and dismissed all of a sudden. So Mark with his So Efficient, and it's just about ready to go.
You hear it okay?
Michael, how are you?
I found something really interesting.
The whole housing market is propped up on these bad loans. They will fail.
The housing market is rock solid.
It's a time bomb.
So Mike Burry, who gets his hair cut at Supercuts and doesn't wear shoes, knows more than Alan Greenspan.
Dr. Mike Burry, yes, he does.
You know what? I'm pissed off. American people are getting screwed by the big banks. And I am getting madder and madder.
It's unbelievable.
Then this guy walks into my office and says,
there's some shady stuff going down. All the banks were having a big old party. A few outsiders saw what no one else could. The whole world economy might collapse.
I'm sure the world's banks have more incentives than greed.
you're wrong.
No one's paying attention.
The banks got greedy, and we can profit off of their stupidity.
You want to bet against the banks?
I think we're either high or having a stroke. Kind of brilliant.
Fraud has never, ever worked. Eventually, things go south. When the hell did we forget all that?
How can the banks let this happen? It's fueled by stupidity.
But that's not stupidity, that's fraud.
Tell me the difference between stupid and illegal, and I'll have my wife's brother arrested.
You have any idea what you just did? You just bet against the American economy.
If you're wrong, you can lose it all. The banks defrauded the American people. Now we can kick them in the teeth.
Okay, here we go.
You target strippers.
With bad loans.
And they're all cash rich.
Woo! Not going to be able to refinance.
On all my loans?
What do you mean all your loans?
I have 5 houses and a condo.
In that movie, which you can see and see more of it on YouTube, you will see that these people made millions of dollars. And so anyway, you'll see there that gives you an inkling of what happened. And here again, as I said, I'm painting this mind picture. What happened? So that when you hear people talk about people bought more house than they could afford, why did they do that? I've seen these people with the big houses and they got these loans. And the people on Wall Street set us up. They set us up and had no regard at all for what was going to happen to us. Matter of fact, there's another video I want to show you, and these videos can tell the story much better than me. It's from a 5-part docuseries called The Con. And after we see this little docuseries, I want you to hear from a couple of people right here in the county who really got shafted, and they want to tell you how that happened to them and what happened to them when they got the boot from their lender and eventually had to give up their home. So if we have that from The Con, we have that from The Con. Do you have that, Mark? The video from The Con? And this is all about the pervasiveness of this whole entire foreclosure debacle. It goes deep, friends, it goes deep. And this will show you a little bit about how deep it goes.
I'm neither an economist or a scholar. I'm just an average American who lost my home and very nearly my family to foreclosure when the market imploded. And I've spent almost every day since trying to find out why. Once the dust settled, it quickly became clear that my story was no different than millions of other Americans. We all thought that we were alone. We all thought that we'd failed. But none of us really knew why.
With a gun in her hand, Addie Polk apparently shot herself in the chest as deputies were knocking on her door with eviction papers in hand.
This dramatic increase in mortgage fraud cases was the canary in the mine. It was the warning.
This was money chasing people. This was not somebody looking for a loan.
It was all designed to maximize profits for all of the different players.
The person who sold you a loan made more money if they sold you a higher rate loan.
They were sold a lie.
They're selling to their very clients these loans that they know are a disaster.
I lost my home, not because of money, because of fraud.
I don't believe Addie Polk took out the mortgage on her home. I don't believe she signed any documents.
They just generated all this junk, took home huge bonuses, and then when it collapsed, they said, oh, not us.
This notion that the financial crisis there wasn't fraud and there wasn't crime is absolutely wrong. It's dead.
They were targeting, in many cases, minorities.
We were waiting for the leadership to say, go. That never happened.
The investigation was suppressed.
This was all part of the same puzzle that was falling apart.
This is the largest conspiracy of lies in the history of the world.
This investigation has just begun.
Now, that producer of that video series, this docu-series, has been in touch with me many times. And he has asked me to ask people to watch the con so that you can really, really know in depth what happened. It's a 5-part docu-series. Now, you got to pay $2 for each one, but it is well worth the investment because it will open your eyes. He called me for at least 3 months and begged me to watch it. And I kept thinking, well, why do I need to watch this? I already know everything. I mean, we've been in the courts, we've been to hearings, we've been to counsel people, we've talked to all these people. We've got the law on our side. Oh, silly me. The law is not on our side. The law needs to be on our side. And the law needs you to make sure that happens. And the next thing I want you to hear from is just a couple of people from Prince George's County who lost their homes, and just for them to tell you just a little bit about what happened so that everybody will know you're not alone. Vernon, are you there? Vernon.
Before we get to Vernon, Josephine Mooring has her hand up.
Oh, okay, Vernon, sit still.
Okay. Good morning again. I just want to say, Elizabeth, that we are dealing with this again, and it's getting out of control. I'm a real estate agent, and I have been for 39 years. And I must say, I didn't do any of those predatory. I wouldn't let my clients take them. I would, definitely advise them when I saw that it was predatory. But the thing is, we're there again.
Absolutely.
And we're also dealing with Wells Fargo, who under the CARES Act, they reached a settlement that they would actually work with people to do modifications. Well, that they settled, and of course the investors made money, but actually they're not working according to the CARES Act provisions to allow people to do a modification. I had worked with one lady. They reduced their mortgage by $20 and said, okay, well, we did a modification. And okay, they can say they reduced it, which means, quote unquote, that seems like a modification, but it's not.
No.
So we need our legislators to get on these big banks like they did before. Now, when they did it before, I got to tell you, when those 5 big banks were sued, I had one of my loans was forgiven. And the loan was $146,000. And I was actually paying the loan. So, but Bank of America sent me a letter that they were forgiving the loan. So, if we work hard, now I have to tell you, I've been very vocal out there with all of the banks about, we don't like this, what you're doing, but one person can't do it. We need everybody to get on board to do this. I mean, we cannot allow them to cause our people, and it's affecting people of color. Come on now. We know, okay? I mean, I've had one gentleman, he was an attorney. He said, how did I get into this loan? I was talking with him. He said, how did I get here? I said, because you're an attorney, but you do not know real estate law. And there's a big difference. So I tell people who said, I'm going to hire an attorney to work on my behalf for my mortgage. If that attorney doesn't know real estate, you just as well go out there and hire the little boy walking down the street.
Hello.
Okay, so we need to educate people, educate our people now, because I see the no-doc loans are out there. Okay, and the no-doc loans is where they get them and everything, because all you need to do is have a certain credit score, and you do not have to produce your income tax returns or actually verify mortgage or anything verify income or anything like that. These loans was actually put out there for professionals like doctors and lawyers, so forth, who does not want to report how much they really made and everything. So I just think educating the people on these products that's being shoved in their face is where we need to start. And then we first need to start by going after these big banks. And then we need to tell our people, the community, do not accept this. Do not accept, have somebody take a look at your loan papers before you sign, because they have no idea what they're signing.
Josephine, it's good to see you again. I remember you. And I thank you so much for that testimony. I really, really do. Because Beth Jacobson, who is on our committee, we have been trying to put this idea across for a long, long time. I have to say that we're not getting a hell of a lot of support from the community, or people are not coming to the board. They're not coming to say, hey, but we've got a plan. And if you can stick with us till the end, what we wanted to do was to be able to show you, to tee this up, to show you what happened. And that testimony is just so important. Beth, do you have anything to say before? I know you're going to get into your presentation, so if you want to save your comments till later, but Miss Josephine got in there and said that. So I don't know, I see you kind of squirming there. So did you have something to say with her? Jody, I see your hand, dear.
Sure. I just wanted to make one comment about the loan modification process. There's federal law out there that governs the process under RESPA for the loan modification, but there's no law out there that says that the servicer has to give you a loan modification. It's just the process. Also, that 50% of the loans that are out there are federally backed loans, and they were covered under the CARES Act. That's your Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, and VA loans. Those do have very specific guidelines for loan modification. The problem is the servicers are not complying with the federal guidelines. That's why you have to have somebody that understands the process, and most attorneys don't understand the process because this was never taught in law school. And this, even though they're requirements of Fannie, Freddie, FHA, they don't understand what the whole process is. So a homeowner does need to know the rights. They need to go to somebody that understands what they are, and do not rely on the servicer to do the right thing, because they do not do the right thing, because it's their vested interest to make money. And by moving to foreclosure, that's how they make their money with all of that. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, and now Jordan Howlett, who is one of our board members and an attorney, he gave a very, very explicit he gave a great presentation on what the process was whenever you get that notice of intent to foreclose. But unfortunately, people didn't attend, but we're going to roll it back again, because I believe that this needs to be something that people have got to hear over and over and over again. And Josephine, you were so right. We've got to do those things, but we have to have a plan of how to get it done. It's one thing to say, we're going to do this or we need to do that, but there's got to be a plan on how to get that done. Jody, what say you? You're muted.
You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
We can now.
One of the things that, and you know, Liz, I'm a great fan of yours. We've worked together on some of these things, but some of the things that I think are the problem with regards, and maybe you all mentioned this because I was late, with people not engaging, is that they don't totally understand the impact that it has on their personal home. You know, when a property goes for a short sale or foreclosure, the value of your home decreases, because now when you look at your market analysis, you're looking at a home that's sold for maybe twice as less as your home is valued at. So if your home is valued at $600,000 and the house goes for $400,000, when you do the market analysis, that property is included in the value of what you can get for your home. Number one, because if you engage people that this impacts you, it just doesn't impact the person that has been foreclosed on, then perhaps people would understand a little bit more how important this actually is to mitigate these foreclosures in your particular neighborhood. And unfortunately, maybe it is a situation where we have to go neighborhood by neighborhood and explain to people how it impacts their value. Also, you know, sometimes it creates blight in their neighborhood. If the banks don't take care of the property, if the grass is growing high, if the windows are shattered, it's kind of like this this program that New York did, the broken window syndrome. If a window's broken, people break into it. That means they're looking at the neighborhood and they can break into yours. So it just creates a problem for every neighborhood if someone doesn't take care of a particular property, which again impacts theirs. Also, homelessness. I think we've talked about this. People don't understand that if people become homeless, you know, they don't have a house to live in, and we as taxpayers end up having to pay for these individuals in addition to the taxes not being paid on that property. So again, who's going to take care of that property if the banks aren't? And there's a many of times that people have had to call the banks and tell them, hey, what's going on here? Because you all aren't taking care of the property. So it's devaluing my property. So I think that with the outreach or marketing, if we looked at marketing, maybe our marketing strategy needs to look at how we can talk to neighborhood by neighborhood and also let people know how this is going to impact your property. And you know, I'm a conspiracy theorist, so I believe that this is all structured.
If it is. It is.
If you increase the value in my neighborhood, then if I want to come along and buy that property, I'm going to get it at a great bargain because now the whole neighborhood has been depressed.
Thank you very much for that comment. And I wanted Vernon to give a chance for him to come in and tell his little story, not his little story, to tell his story about what happened to him and how he's trying to put his life back together again. Vernon, are you there?
Yes, I am. And thank you so much. Thanks for the NAACP and Ms. Johnson to take a moment to share my story, a 7-year journey. And yes, I am a victim of this great foreclosure scheme. So everybody can hear me. So, you know, once again, this journey started at 2010 with a simple error of an escrow account, which we never had, which Wells Fargo somehow created this escrow account. Somehow they suddenly had an escrow account that we just suddenly just produce overnight. And everybody know what an escrow account is. You can either have that escrow account incorporated in your contract, or you can have the option of paying your taxes and all that stuff outside of the your mortgage payment. Okay. So after a few months, this process was going forward. We discovered that 2 of our payments were applied to an escrow account, which we never agreed to, never had with Wells Fargo. And that's how we got behind in a 2 months of our rent, of our mortgage, went to an escrow account, which we had never known, know anything about. So therefore, you know, we denied, and Wells Fargo finally denied that they made a mistake. They applied this money to an escrow account that did not exist. But however, they never could put it back into the original account. So that's where we begun. That's where I began my plight and my fight, and that's how I became a part of this foreclosure situation, because I was behind 2 months and I never was able to catch up in rears, and it was just a mess. It was just a mess from that point. So without any further notice, we just considered and was receiving, foreclosure notices and one after another. And I hired a lot of attorneys in this process. And once again, there's a difference from real estate attorneys from your regular attorneys that offend you in different ways. So I just want to, not take too much more time, but I just wanted to express that that we definitely need to create more action than just talk and meetings. We need to really create a movement. We really need to create be active. And I just want to thank you again, Ms. Johnson, for your efforts that you've put through, and you've hung in here, and you've dealt with this process and with these issues over the years. And I think you're just doing a marvelous job. And I think we need to come behind and support you in every effort, any way that we can. And it's time to make a statement. And I think
we're going to get it done, Vernon. And I'm going to be calling on you and all these other people, really, with this plan where we can get a groundswell of people to start fighting this in a way that these lenders understand. Because believe me, there's strength in numbers and power to the people. Right on.
Yeah. Right on.
Right on. And I see Adele Penny is there. And Adele's going to take a few minutes to tell us about her story. And then we're going to go on and we're going to hear about generational wealth and how you need to understand what it means when you lose that house, what it means to your children and your children's children, the way that other people build wealth where real estate is at the root of that wealth. And we're going to talk about that. But right now we're going to hear from Adele Penny. Adele, are you there? I guess, Adele, I see your name.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I can't say anything that hasn't already been said, but it's something that happens to you mentally when your life is taken away and you're not dead. You go through a mental. If you don't have a support base, you can really lose your mind behind this kind of trauma. When you were talking about generational wealth, my house was more than just a home and my home-based business. It was a life source for my friends and my family. I miss the fact that I can't watch my grandchildren over the weekend and put them in the bathtub on Saturday night and take them to church on Sunday morning. I miss the fact that my church is not there anymore. I miss the fact that my community doesn't thrive. I don't have that sense of purpose in my community anymore. I was president of the beautification committee in my neighborhood association, and I miss all my friends. I miss the sense of having that support around me. But while I was going through this process, I saw a lot of people turn their back on me. They thought I was crazy. A lot of people thought, well, she didn't pay her mortgage. That's why she lost her house. And I still get choked up about thinking about all the people that I had loved and thought that loved me. But when I went through this process, that somebody that didn't know me just took my home because they wanted to have a couple more coins in their pocket. And then I found out I wasn't the only one. And then I got strong, and then I didn't want to let go anymore. And then I was ready to fight. And I kept going. I kept calling. I kept making calls. I kept fighting. They evicted me 3 times before I left my home. And I couldn't let go, and I still am not letting go. And the more that I strive, I educate myself, and I find out more and more. And no, it's not my fault. It's not anybody's fault that lost their home or that is losing their home. It's these big banksters, it's the government, and then we have the lawyers and the judges, the people that are supposed to be protecting us. They got their hands tied because it's all about money. And I know I'm probably not making any sense. I probably feel like I'm rambling, but that's the way I feel about it. And I know that the only way that we're going to make a change is that we get a whole bunch of people and march on Washington.
Adele, thank you so much. Adele's been working with me hand in hand, and I asked her to please just give a comment because she was the one who was with me on the hearings that you'll hear about a little bit later on. Oh, we're getting pressed for time. But I want you to see this next video, which is going to show Cory Booker. And we're going to be it's going to be talking about something that's so important, generational wealth. People don't understand what it means for your children to be able to get a house that's paid for or almost paid for. That's not happening. It didn't happen to those 75,000 people who were foreclosed on up until now. And believe me, just as Ms. Morning said, it's going to happen again. Those 896 foreclosures that I was telling you about, oh, it's going to happen big time right here in Prince George's County. But let's go ahead and talk about the racial wealth gap and see if you could enjoy this video. It's my hope that you guys found that interesting. I know that it was long, but it was to help drive home this point of generational wealth that people just kind of like gloss over. And now we've got our very own Beth Jacobson, who you saw in that video. She's going to bring us home on this issue, and then we're going to talk about what we can do about it. Beth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Liz. One thing I would like to point out that was not in that video, it talked about that the Fair Housing Act was enacted in 1968. Due to the recession, the amount of African Americans of home ownership is the same now as it was in 1968 in the year 2022. Because as it said in there, African Americans were more likely to be put into a subprime loan and therefore more likely to lose their home during the Great Recession. And so one of the things Liz wanted me to talk about is what can we do in Maryland? What laws do we have on the books that aren't being enforced? So one of the laws, and actually this is a federal law, that is supposed to help borrowers now is that when you get a loan, you have to have the ability to repay the loan. Now that sounds a little foreign. You would think that that should have been a law all along. And if it was, we would not have ended up in the subprime crisis. There was no law to take into account the homeowner's ability to repay the loan. And if you listen to that, that sounds a little bit crazy. Why would you give somebody a loan that you knew they didn't have the ability to repay? You were basically setting that borrower up for failure. That's what these banks did because they immediately sold these loans on the secondary market. The banks got their money all up front, sold the loans. They're all, if you watch The Big Short, there's all these credit default swaps, all these various insurances. The investors were always protected. The loan originators, the big banks, were always protected. It's a homeowner that has never, ever been protected. And I alluded to earlier in our conversation about these big settlements, the $2 billion settlement that Wells Fargo and DOJ settled based on Wells Fargo's origination of predatory loans. The homeowner has not benefited in any way. In fact, I'm currently working with a homeowner in Baltimore County. Her loan was one of those loans. They actually, in that settlement, listed which loans were part of that, which are the securitized trusts. And we brought that up as a defense in court. And of course, guess what? The judge denied it. Despite the fact in Maryland, there is case law that states, and I'm going to read this, in order to docket to foreclose is premised on the requirement that the lender has submitted true and accurate copies of the lien instruments and has a right to foreclose and can calculate the debt. We brought that up as a defense because the debt was wrong. The court didn't want to hear it. There's a law in Maryland, a case law, which is called unclean hands. In this particular case, we raised the issue that she was put into a predatory loan. And even though the law is clear that this is the doctrine of unclean hands, the doctrine does not mandate that those seeking equitable relief must have exhibited unblemished conduct in every transaction in which they've ever been a party to, but rather that the particular matter for which the litigant seeks equitable relief must not be marred by any fraudulent, illegal, or inequitable conduct. So when you listen to that, it's very specific. A bank cannot benefit by putting somebody into a predatory loan. I've been doing foreclosure defense since 2010. Not once in the state of Maryland, to my knowledge, has any judge dismissed a foreclosure case based on the fact that a homeowner was put into a predatory loan, that the documents were fraudulent, or that the documents that they present in court, such as the note, is a fraudulent document, or that the assignment is fraudulent. So these laws are on the books. There's a law in Anderson versus Burson case law that says if the homeowner states that they do not believe that that note is authentic, the burden shifts to the plaintiff to authenticate that note. Homeowners don't realize that. If they bring it up to the judge doesn't enforce it. Basically, these judges, specifically in Prince George's County, are robo-signing denials for homeowners. There was a case about a year and a half ago that started in Prince George's County Circuit Court, where the Court of Special Appeals stated foreclosure is an equitable procedure and the substitute trustees must demonstrate that the particular foreclosure has not been marred by fraudulent, illegal, or inequitable acts. Right there, the court is being very specific to the judges that they can't move forward with the foreclosure action if there's these fraudulent acts on that. And the court said to the homeowner, there is nothing routine about losing a home. And when a homeowner asserts a timely, valid challenge to a foreclosure, the Maryland rules instruct our courts to slow the foreclosure action as necessary to protect the homeowner and ensure that the instruments are valid and that the plaintiffs otherwise have a right to foreclosure. That does not happen. 99% of the time, despite the homeowner submits a timely filed motion, there is no hearing on the merits. And this is not just pro se litigants. These are homeowners that often have an attorney filing these motions. So that is something that as a group and that Liz is putting together a coalition, we need to get the word out that the judges are not following the laws. Has anybody stopped to think is what's in that judge's portfolio for their 401k? Is it Wells Fargo? Is it Bank of America? Why is a judge going to rule against an entity where they're making money off of that entity? Those are questions that homeowners aren't asking. Those are questions that our legislature is not asking that need to be asked. So I just want to quickly go over things that that we can change through the legislature and go back to what we're talking about, how a bill becomes a law. These are bills that we believe need to be put in front of the legislature. And a lot of them aren't that involved. They're pretty simple. For example, Maryland currently has a law that the courts are supposed to may screen foreclosure complaints being filed. Those are the order to docket, that they can set up a screening process to make sure all the documents are accurate. But the law says may. We need to change a law that says shall. The court shall screen these because the courts are not screening these documents. So these foreclosure actions could be stopped at the very beginning when they're filed in courts. But because the legislature uses the word may instead of shall, it's not happening. I've seen in one case over 1,000 cases where a judge has actually reviewed, or a screener has actually reviewed the documents and said this is not compliant to Maryland law, that the plaintiff has to fix it. Other things that that we need to have is because we already have case law in Anderson versus Burson that if the homeowner challenges the authenticity of the note, that the bank has to prove it. We need to make that a law in front of the judge that the bank has to authenticate the note with the witness that has been verified with personal knowledge as to the note and prove the note is legitimate in front of the court. That's not happening right now. The biggest thing I think that needs to be done in Maryland is called a quasi-judicial state, which means it's a court of equity. which basically means every judge is ignoring all of those things that I just read to you in case law. Unclean hands, the fact that the court has said if the homeowner presents a valid defense to the legitimacy of what has been filed, there should be a hearing. If we switch it to do what DC has, instead of being quasi, which is kind of fake judicial, to fully judicial, that means there can be discovery, you can have interrogatories, you can have a deposition. The homeowner then has a chance to ask all of these questions. One of the bills that was presented this year that looks like is not going to move forward was that if a homeowner files a counterclaim to the actions filed in the foreclosure docket, that counterclaim has to be heard first. The type of things that a homeowner would file a counterclaim would be due to predatory lending. They were put into a loan that the lender knew that they were going to fail, or the documents aren't true, or that there's a lost note affidavit and they can't prove that the chain of ownership of that lost note to where they're trying to enforce the foreclosure now, or that the assignment is fraudulent. I have looked over thousands of assignments in the state of Maryland, and never once have I found an assignment that was not fraudulent. On its face, that should be an invalid assignment and should cause into question that the homeowner, or excuse me, that the bank has unclean hands. But again, none of this ever happens. All of this is done under, I would say, under the kind of in the dark corners of the court. Nobody understands this because a homeowner, first of all, is scared to death because it's the thought of losing their home, and they don't talk about it. Just like a couple of the people on this call, they're embarrassed. They don't understand that the bank set them up for failure. So first of all, we want to say to the homeowner, do not be embarrassed. You were put in this position by greedy bankers that had the ultimate goal that your house was going to end up in foreclosure. And we need to fight against that. And we have the way to fight against it. The laws are on the book. So what's the next step? We have to make sure that the judges, who, by the way, many of them are elected, that they need to know that we're here and we're going to question them. And we have to get more people to rally around, especially the Court of Special Appeals when these cases are being heard, that you cannot violate homeowners' rights when the laws are on the books and they're still being ignored by the court. I will just stop there because, again, I get really long-winded because I'm very passionate about this. And I know we're short on time here. So I'll wait. If there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but I'll stop my presentation now.
There's one question.
Go ahead, Stacy.
This is an election year, and there are judges that are going to be up for election or re-election. Are there questions, and there are going to be a lot of forums that'll be held where we can, ask these candidates questions. Can you post somewhere good questions we can ask to help bring visibility to this issue, to these candidates when they're attending these different forums?
Absolutely. I can assist in drafting those questions. That's an excellent idea.
And where could we find the questions once they're once they're developed?
Liz, will we put them on Strategic Housing Solutions website?
Absolutely. We have thanks to Bob Ross, who is our past president, we have a website called Strategic Housing Solutions. That's, you can go online at SHS Maryland.
I will post it in the chat.
Oh, good. Thank you. I forget about that check thing. Yeah, very good, Beth. We can do that. We can utilize that website. Okay.
I'm sorry, is there a list of judges that are up for election, and where can we find that?
That's an excellent question, Adele. And this is one of the reasons why we had to come up with our plan, because we need people who are going to work on issues like that. When we put together an organization plan, we came up with 13 different things that need to happen in order for us to be successful in doing what we need to do. And these 13 different action groups that we put together, that we need people who are going to be working on the legal team. We need people on the financial team. We need people on the Spanish-speaking team, the Latinx community. We need the fraternities, the sororities. We need the faith-based team. All of these people, we've come up with a plan to be able to have these people to come in and work with us, because guess what? I cannot do it all. Beth cannot do it all. We need help. So I hope that answers your question as to whether or not that could be done. Maybe that's something you'll do, Adele. Okay, carry on. Any more questions? I'm gonna get you on that one, Adele. Are there any more questions?
I put my information in the chat, so please feel free to reach out to me. I am happy to give seminars, whether like this Zoom or in person, now that we're meeting more in person, about, and we can tailor to specifically whatever your organization is. We can talk about the upcoming spike in foreclosure actions. If you've been out there looking at that, foreclosure actions have spiked, not just due to COVID. This is something that I'm finding with more clients is these second liens, the ones that were not forgiven, that have been sitting out there where homeowners may not have made a payment in 15 years, are now rearing their heads to foreclose because now homeowners have equity in their property. So homeowners that have been moving along thinking, okay, life is good again. I'm paying my first mortgage. Everything's fine. Forgot about that second. That second's coming back and it's going to try to take your house. So those are all different things that we can talk about: predatory lending, reverse redlining. So again, please feel free to reach out to me. My information's there in the chat.
Well, there was a lot more that we had to present, but unfortunately we have run out of time. But I just talked to Mark, our engineer, and he says that we can come back again, because I want to show you what lobbyists do, how they go in and make the legislators do what they want to have done. And so a lot of people know the word lobby. They think, oh yeah, lobbyists. But I want to show you what they really, really do. We just went to testify on a bill that Beth just talked about, HR 803, where all the bill would do would just allow us the chance to go in to the court and assert a defense. And guess what? Adele Penny and I were the only people from the community, Beth could not make it, who testified on that bill. But I want you to know that the lobbyists, they came in full speed ahead. They had the lobbyists from the American Banking Association, the Credit Union Association, lawyers, because guess what? They were complaining that if this bill made it through, it would take them longer to take your house. And even the chairperson of that committee, he said, are you saying to our lawyer, are you saying that you want everybody who's about to be foreclosed on to have a jury trial? Oh my God, we can't have that. No, just take their houses without a jury trial. And you say it's going to take you 100 days? Well, we're just going to make sure we're going to get, you can take it quicker. So we've got to fight against these things, folks. We have got to get behind these legislators and just legislators like the woman who introduced this bill. Her name was Nicole Williams from District 22. She was the one who introduced that bill. We should have been behind her, but we weren't. We just complain that these legislators aren't doing this, they aren't doing that, but they will listen to us. The more people who get behind our legislators, they see you as a vote. So if they're, oh my God, 1,000 people are protesting, well, I better get behind this bill. So your voice is important. I'm not going to keep preaching, but I do want to send a shout out to, and in closing, to those legislators who have helped us in the past. And that would be Charles Sidnor from District 44 in Baltimore County, Senator Jill Carter in District 41 for Baltimore County, Delegate Joseline Pena Melnick, and I mean her staff member, Edith Perry. She's always responds to what we need. Delegate Pena Melnick was the one who said to me, Liz, we have over 3,000 bills to consider every year. We depend on people like you and your people to tell us what's going on. And we want to also talk about who else? Edith Perry and Delegate Vaughn Stewart, who was helping us out as well. And that was just so great. And Senator Jill Carter, I don't know if I mentioned her, but those are the people who have been trying to help us out. But you know what? They haven't had the people behind them, but we're going to get behind those people and those lawyers like Kelly Baker, who works with us all the time. And those people like Beth Jacobson, who works her tail off. We're going to get behind them. And next time we have this seminar, we're going to tell you how that's going to happen.
Liz, you're absolutely right. And before we leave, I want to make sure everybody knows how to get in touch with you and your team. The second line, if you plug into your browser, pgcnaacp.org/contact us, you select the Housing and Family Finance Committee. Once you submit the email, it'll go directly to Liz. Also, if you're not a member, we ask that you please join the branch. There's so many things we're doing, so many things we want to do, and we simply can't do it without your support. So in order to join the branch, follow that link that says pgcnaacp.org/join us. It's only $30. Once you join, we'll put you to work, making a big difference right here in Prince George's County. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Liz, and Liz can close us out. Liz?
Okay, so on behalf of all the dedicated members of our hardworking volunteers on the Housing Committee and the people who come together to help us, I'm going to say we're out. Thanks for coming. We're out.
Thank you.